I'm Alan Reid, professional watercolour artist. Where we are now is the route from Craster to Dunstanburgh Castle. I found a spot away from the wind where we've got a bit of foreground water with the castle in the background. And the idea is to do two watercolours, one in my sketchbook and one on a watercolour block. So whilst one's drying, I can be working on the other one. So what I've got here is a portable box of watercolour paints with a range of 12 colours. I'll probably just be using about 5 or 6 of those colours. This is quite a heavy watercolour paper, and I'm going to start off by putting a wash over the whole page, which will set the mood for the whole particular scene. Here I've got a number 20 Stratford & York synthetic brush, which has normally got quite a nice point, but this is quite good for putting some larger washes on. And I'm just going to start mixing up a little bit of a wash, lemon yellow and cadmium yellow as well. Working quite rapidly. I'm going to cover the whole page with this yellow wash, keeping it quite sort of concentrated in the middle, and then not quite so concentrated towards the top of the sky. I'm just mixing some blue here. This is going to be for the kind of greyish, yeah, it's quite a nice gentle grey colour. You'll notice that this is fading quite nicely into the yellow part. So now we're going to go for these lower clouds. The sky is going to be reflected a little bit in the rock pools, so I'm going to revert back to the yellow colour. Now the danger with working with blue and yellow is that it can go a bit of a yucky green colour. So we'll get this back in. That's better. There's no hint of blue there. As we're waiting for that to dry, which might take a good 10-15 minutes, I'm going to tackle another one in this sketchbook. These lovely clouds that are coming in at a slightly oblique angle, I'm going to render those with a few simple brush marks, and that will provide almost like a focal point direction to the castle itself. Let's see what these are going to be like. Let's test the colour. And then we'll just get a few clouds over this side. So I'm going to start off by getting the castle in around about this area here. And then once we've got the castle in, we can start knocking in some of these rocks here. So here we go. What I'm doing at the minute is this central main part of the castle. What I'm not trying to do here is copy a photograph. What I'm trying to do really is capture something of the coldness and the starkness of the Northumbrian coastline. So we've got the bulk of the castle in here, and it's sitting on a grassy mound. The nice thing about working with this particular brush, it's got a beautiful point, which means that you can cover large areas of the paper, and at the same time you can work in some quite intricate, detailed areas without getting too niggly and fiddly. It just drops quite acutely down that side. I'm going to add a bit more detail to the castle now. These detailed areas are helping to create a greater sense of contrast against the sky. This grassy mounds is a little bit darker on that side, so we'll just darken that down a little bit. Putting colour onto wet areas, you can see how it's spreading, and that's sometimes an effect that you want to kind of achieve, particularly when you're just wanting the grass to sort of blend in. But when you want crisp, sharp areas, then obviously you must wait until the paint's actually dry. So there you go, we've got that area there. And what I'm going to do is introduce the sea, and we're going to bring this in from the right hand side here. It's important to try and get a fairly straight line here. A suggestion of some waves. We're not going to see too much of this because the rocks in front of me are going to obliterate quite a bit of that. We've got a few reflected areas here, so I'm just going to put a few flicks of blue in to suggest reflections of the sky. And now I'm going to start getting in some really quite strong defined areas for the rocks, which are going to provide interesting focal points. Here we go. Some quite strong angular rock shapes using a combination of the dark Payne's grey and the sepia colour. Not quite so dark over this side here, so we'll just make this a little bit lighter. This rock pool in the foreground's quite interesting. The way of actually painting the rock pool is to paint the dark shapes around it. We're probably going to need two tones to do this, so the first tone is what I'm putting on now, and when that dries, it shouldn't take very long, we'll get the second one in. Whilst this bit's drying, there's a quite nice dark area coming in here into the sea. So we'll just pick that out, which will add a bit more substance to this rocky outcrop. And get that knocked in. Piece jutting out here, we'll put that in as well. And I'm just going to pick my way around the painting here. We've got quite a dark foreground area, but that's going to go even darker as I start defining very specific rocks that will give it even more depth. And I'm trying to capture these ridges and rocky aspects of the foreground. I'm using the texture of the paper. I'm also using the point of the brush as well as the flat of the brush. We've got some quite fine linear aspects to the rocks, so it really is almost like a pen and ink drawing part of this. See, it's a lovely deep rich colour that we've got here. It almost looks like black, but it's not actually black itself, it's a mix. A lot of these lines that I'm putting in are helping the whole thing to, I want the rocks to look almost wet and dangerous and slippery, which they are. I'm not trying to paint every single crack and every single little crevice. I'm really wanting just to give a suggestion of all the activity that's going on, because ideally your eye is meant to go to the castle, so I don't want to labour this too much. You'll see from the scene in front of you that the sky has changed. We've got some darker clouds now coming in here, but you can't keep changing the painting as you're going along. You've really got to live with those first marks. One of the important things as well with watercolour painting is knowing when to stop. It's very easy to overdo it and put too many marks in, and I'm bordering on that point where I should probably stop, and all that remains for this one is to sign it, really. Go. So I'm just going to define this area. I've just realised there's a couple of little areas of detail on the castle. So get the brush back to a nice point. Quite a small painting this, so there's not a huge amount of detail that you can put in on this kind of scale. So there you go. Quite a contrast between the two paintings. If we look at them side by side, the different brush marks, different treatments. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed watching me paint as much as I've enjoyed painting. To see more of my work, studio work and sketchbook work, you can visit my website alanreid.com, or take a look at my watercolour painting blog, which is blog.alanreid.com.